The blueprints for the cottage renovation were spread across my kitchen table when my phone buzzed with a text from my son. I'd been sketching out the new dock for 3 hours, the way Margaret and I used to plan our summers at the lake before the cancer took her 18 months ago. The message was short. Dad, I need to talk. It's important. I poured myself another coffee from the Tim Hortons travel mug I'd bought that morning in Barrie on my way home from the hardware store, and I called him back. My name is Raymond Holloway. I'm 63 years old, and I've spent 41 of those years building Holloway Construction into one of the most respected firms in the Greater Toronto Area. We've put up hospitals in Mississauga, condo towers along the lake shore, and enough custom homes in Oakville and Burlington to fill a small town. My son Daniel is 31, an architect with his own firm, and until that afternoon in October, I would have told you he was the smartest young man I knew. Dad, he said when he picked up, and I could hear the nervous energy in his voice. I met someone. Now, you have to understand something about Daniel. He lost his mother when he was 29, and he handled it about as well as any son can, which is to say he didn't handle it at all. He threw himself into work, stopped calling as often, and the few times we did have dinner, I could see the grief sitting behind his eyes like a stone he couldn't swallow. So when he told me about this woman, a marketing consultant named Vanessa Crawford, I was genuinely happy for him. I wanted him to be happy. Margaret would have wanted it too. She's different, Dad, he said. I've never felt this way about anyone. I want you to meet her. They'd been dating for 6 weeks. I met Vanessa on a Sunday afternoon at a restaurant on King Street West, the kind of place with exposed brick and mason jar cocktails and a $24 burger. She was 34, strikingly beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, with auburn hair cut in a sharp bob and a smile she deployed like a business card. She shook my hand with both of hers and told me how much she'd heard about me, and how my son had talked about his father the way some men talk about war heroes. I liked her. God help me, I liked her at first. She asked about the company. She asked about Margaret, which most women her age wouldn't have had the sense to do. She laughed at Daniel's jokes and held his hand on the table and talked about her work with a charity that helped newcomers to Canada find housing. By the time the bill came, I was thinking that maybe, finally, my boy had found someone who deserved him. 3 weeks later, they announced their engagement. I was standing in the kitchen of my house in Oakville, looking out at the backyard where Margaret had planted her perennials, when Daniel told me over the phone that he was going to marry Vanessa in 4 months. 4 months. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just watched a blue jay land on the bird feeder Margaret had hung from the maple tree the summer before she got sick. Dad, are you there? I'm here, son. I know it's fast. I know what you're thinking, but when you know, you know. Mom always said that about you. He used his mother against me. I don't think he meant to. He was just trying to explain himself. But I heard it, and I felt it in my chest like a small, quiet betrayal. Whatever you need, Daniel, I said. I'm here for you. Always. The engagement dinner was held at my house in Oakville 2 weeks later. Vanessa wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first truck, and she brought her mother, a woman named Linda who barely spoke and sat in the corner of the living room nursing a glass of Pinot Grigio like it was an anchor. Linda had the tired eyes of a woman who had seen things. I made a note of that and filed it away. It was during dinner that the first crack appeared. Vanessa was asking about the house. Innocent questions at first. When was it built? Had I done the renovations myself? Then, over the main course, she looked around the dining room and said, Raymond, this place must be worth, what, $3 million now? With the market the way it is? Daniel laughed uncomfortably. Vanessa, come on. What? I'm just curious. It's a beautiful home. I smiled and said something polite about Oakville real estate, and I changed the subject to the Leafs and their chances that season. But she came back to it twice more that night, once about the cottage up in Muskoka, once about the company, and whether Daniel was going to take it over one day. Each time she asked with the careful casualness of someone who had rehearsed the question in the mirror. Linda watched her daughter talk. She didn't eat much. And when Vanessa laughed too loudly at one of Daniel's stories, I saw Linda flinch. Just for a second. Just enough. That night, after they left, I sat in my study with a glass of Lagavulin and thought about my Margaret, She used to tell me I was too suspicious of people, that I saw angles where there were only straight lines. But she also used to say that I was rarely wrong, and that was a different thing altogether. I called a man I'd known for 26 years. His name is Gordon Pritchard, and he runs a private investigation firm out of North York. I'd used him twice before, both times for contract disputes, and he was the most thorough, discreet man I'd ever hired. I told him I needed a full background check on Vanessa Crawford, age 34, residing in a condo in Liberty Village. I told him to take his time, but not too much time, because my son was getting married in a little over 3 months. Gordon called me back 11 days later and asked if I could come to his office. I drove up the next morning. Gordon is a heavy-set man in his late 60s who still wears a shirt and tie to work and keeps a framed photo of his retirement from the Toronto Police Service on his desk. He poured me a coffee, sat down across from me, and slid a manila folder across the desk. "Raymond," he said, "you're not going to like this." I opened the folder. Vanessa Crawford was not Vanessa Crawford. Her legal name was Vanessa Renee Boucher, and she had been born in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, 34 years ago. She had changed her name legally at 26 after her second engagement ended in what Gordon described as a civil settlement under a non-disclosure agreement. There had been a third engagement to a 52-year-old dentist in Ottawa, which had also ended in a settlement. There was no marketing consultancy. The charity she claimed to volunteer with had never heard of her. She had $87,000 in credit card debt and a line of credit nearly maxed out against a condo she was renting, not owning. And there was more. Linda Boucher, the quiet mother, had filed for bankruptcy twice. She had also filed a restraining order against her own daughter in 2019, which had been dropped 2 weeks later. Gordon had spoken to a retired neighbor in Trois-Rivières who said that Linda had once told her, over a bottle of wine, that her daughter was not right in the head and never has been. I sat in Gordon's office for a long time. I drank my coffee. I looked at the photos of Vanessa at 24, at 28, at 31, always standing next to a different older man, always smiling the same careful smile. "What do you want to do?" Gordon asked. I told him I needed more. I needed recordings. I needed her in her own words. I needed something my son couldn't argue with. Because I knew Daniel, and I knew that if I walked into his apartment with a folder full of paper, he'd accuse me of being jealous of his happiness. He'd accuse me of trying to replace his mother by controlling his life. I'd seen it in his eyes the last time we had dinner. He was already waiting for me to disapprove. Gordon said he knew a woman in the tech side of the business, a specialist. She could help me set something up that was legal in Ontario, given that one party to the conversation, namely me, would be consenting to the recording. I told him to make the call. The next 2 months were the loneliest of my life since Margaret died. I played the part of the supportive father. I went to the engagement party at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, and I gave a speech about how proud I was of my son, and Vanessa cried pretty, measured tears. I paid for the venue at the Langdon Hall Country House Hotel in Cambridge, because that's what she wanted, and I didn't argue about the $180,000 price tag. I smiled for the engagement photos. I let Daniel hug me and tell me he loved me, and I hugged him back, and I did not say a word. Meanwhile, I was recording. At Sunday dinners at my house, I had a small device hidden in the bookshelf, another in the sideboard. I caught Vanessa twice, asking Daniel pointedly about whether I'd written a will and whether the cottage would go to him. I caught her asking him, in a whisper she thought no one could hear, how much the life insurance policy was worth. I caught her complaining to him about his controlling father and suggesting that maybe, after the wedding, it would be healthier if Daniel set some boundaries with me. I also had Gordon's people watching her. She was meeting a man named Marcus Tremblay at a hotel bar in Yorkville, twice a week. Marcus Tremblay was her ex-fiancé, the dentist from Ottawa. The wedding was scheduled for the second Saturday in February at Langdon Hall. 160 guests, a string quartet during the ceremony, filet mignon and pan-seared Arctic char. Vanessa had chosen every detail. 4 days before the wedding, she came to my house alone. Daniel was in Vancouver on a business trip, visiting a client. Vanessa showed up unannounced at 3 in the afternoon, in a camel coat and leather gloves, and told me she needed to talk to me about something delicate. I invited her into the living room. I offered her tea. She declined. She sat on the sofa where Margaret used to sit, and she looked at me with eyes that had gone cold in a way I had not yet seen. "Raymond," she said, "I need you to do something for Daniel and me." "What's that, Vanessa?" "We need a house. Not a starter home. A real house, in Oakville, near you. I've been looking. There's a property on Lakeshore Road that's listed at $2.4 million. I need you to buy it for us as a wedding gift." I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. "I know you have the money," she said. "I know you love Daniel. And I know you want grandchildren someday. It would mean the world to him, even if he's too proud to ask." "Vanessa," I said carefully, "a gift like that is a conversation between Daniel and me, not you and me." Her face shifted. The polish came off, just slightly, and I saw for the first time what was underneath. "Raymond, let me be very clear. If you don't buy us that house, I'm going to go to the police. I'm going to tell them that you've been making me uncomfortable, that you touched me, that you came into my bedroom at your cottage last summer and put your hand on my leg. I have text messages I can fabricate. I have friends who will say, 'I confided in them.' I'll destroy your company. I'll destroy your reputation. And Daniel will never speak to you again, because he will believe me before he believes you. You know he will." I stared at her. I did not move. "You have until Friday morning to transfer the funds. I'll send you the wire instructions." She stood up, smoothed her coat, and walked toward the door. Then she turned back and smiled, the same smile I'd seen at that first lunch on King Street. "It's nothing personal, Raymond. I just know how these things work." She left. I sat in Margaret's spot on the sofa for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel afraid. I felt, for the first time in 18 months, completely awake. I felt the way I used to feel on the job site when a subcontractor tried to cheat us on materials and I caught him red-handed. That old, cold clarity. I called Gordon. I told him what had happened. I asked if the recorder in the sideboard had picked it up. Crystal clear, Raymond. Every word. I called my lawyer, Helena Stavros, who had handled my affairs for 20 years. I told her what I needed. I told her I wanted it all ready by Saturday. Then I called Linda Boucher. I'd gotten her number from Gordon. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Scarborough, which Vanessa had never once visited in the 8 months she'd been dating my son. Linda answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was flat, tired. "Linda," I said, "my name is Raymond Holloway. I'm Daniel's father. I think we need to talk." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I wondered when you'd call," she said. We met the next day at a diner in Scarborough. Linda ordered a black coffee and nothing else. She was 58 years old, and she looked 70. She told me, over that one cup of coffee, about a daughter who had manipulated her own mother out of her home equity when Linda was in her 40s, about men who had called her in tears, warning her about her own child, about a grandson from Vanessa's brief, unacknowledged first marriage at 21, a little boy who lived with his father in Sherbrooke now, who Vanessa had not seen in 11 years. "I tried to warn Daniel's friend," Linda said, "the one who introduced them. I tracked him down on Facebook. He thought I was crazy. Vanessa had already gotten to him." "Why are you telling me this, Linda?" She looked at me with those tired, tired eyes. "Because I'm her mother, and I'm the one who made her this way. Her father left when she was 9. I drank. I wasn't there. And by the time I was sober, she was already 15 years old and already learning that men would give her things if she smiled the right way. I can't fix her, Raymond. I tried for 20 years. But maybe I can save your boy." I asked her if she would come to the wedding. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Saturday, February 14th. Langdon Hall. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. Vanessa had chosen Valentine's Day, of course, because she understood optics, and she understood that a Valentine's Day wedding would make her look like a woman who believed in love. I arrived at 2. I wore a charcoal suit Margaret had helped me pick out 6 years ago. In my breast pocket, I carried a small envelope. In my inside jacket pocket, I carried a portable speaker. In my phone, I had 3 audio files, carefully time-stamped, carefully authenticated by Helena, carefully ready. Linda Boucher arrived at 3. She wore a navy dress and carried a purse that looked like it had been picked up at a winter's sale. She sat in the back row, alone, and did not speak to anyone. Vanessa walked down the aisle at 4:07. She was, I will admit, beautiful. The kind of beautiful that photographers pay for. Daniel was crying at the altar. Actually crying. My son, who had not cried at his mother's funeral because he was trying to be strong for me. The officiant, a young woman from some online ordination service, began her speech. She got through the welcome. She got through the blessing. She got to the part where she asked, "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." I stood up. I stood up slowly, the way a man my age stands up after sitting for a long time, and every head in the room turned to look at me. Daniel's face went white. Vanessa's went still in a way that a snake goes still. "I have something to say," I said, and I'd asked the room to forgive an old man for interrupting. "But I'm not going to let my son marry this woman without saying what needs to be said." Daniel took a step toward me. "Dad, not here, not now." I pulled the speaker from my jacket. I set it on the edge of the nearest table. I pulled out my phone. "Daniel, I love you more than anything in this world, more than your mother ever knew, and she knew everything. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because 4 days ago this woman came to my home and threatened to accuse me of assault if I didn't buy her a $2.4 million house on Lakeshore Road. And I have the recording." The room inhaled, all at once, like a single creature. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room, clear, confident, cold. Every word. The threat, the demand, the smile I could practically see through the speaker. When it finished, no one moved. Daniel was staring at Vanessa, and Vanessa was staring at me, and her face was not cold anymore. It was something else. It was the face of a woman watching a long game collapse. "There's more," I said. "There's video from the parking lot of the Four Seasons in Yorkville, where Vanessa has been meeting her ex-fiancé, Dr. Marcus Tremblay, twice a week, for the past 3 months. There are bank records. There are the 2 previous settlements she received under non-disclosure agreements from men she was engaged to before my son. Helena, my lawyer, has the complete file. It's going to the Halton Regional Police tomorrow morning, and it's also going to Dr. Tremblay's wife, who I understand does not know about the affair." I looked at Vanessa. She was no longer still. She was shaking. "But before any of that," I said, "I'd like to introduce someone. Linda, would you stand up, please?" Linda stood in the back row. Every head turned. "This is Linda Boucher, Vanessa's mother. You've never met her, because Vanessa has spent the last 6 months pretending her mother lives in Quebec and doesn't travel. Linda has some things she'd like to say to her daughter, but mostly she came here today to stand with me because she knew what was coming, and she wanted Daniel to know that he is not the first man her daughter has done this to, just the one she almost got away with." Vanessa turned and ran. She ran in her wedding dress, down the aisle, past the guests, out the grand wooden doors of Langdon Hall. 2 officers from the Waterloo Regional Police, who I had arranged to be present with Helena's assistance, were waiting on the front steps. She was detained for the recording. The formal charges of extortion came 3 days later. Daniel did not move from the altar. He stood there for what felt like a very long time, the string quartet behind him silent, the officiant frozen with her mouth open. Then he looked at me, and he looked at Linda, and he walked down the aisle past the guests, and he sat down in the front row and put his face in his hands. I went and sat beside him. I didn't say anything for a while. I just put my arm around my son, my grown 31-year-old son, and I let him cry the way he hadn't been able to cry at his mother's funeral. He cried for a long time. Linda came and sat on the other side of him. She didn't touch him. She just sat there. After a while, Daniel looked up. His eyes were red and his face was a mess, and he looked at me like a little boy who has finally understood something terrible. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, son. Just come home." The guests filed out quietly. Someone had the good sense to tell the caterers to pack the food and donate it to a shelter in Kitchener. The string quartet, God bless them, took their instruments and left without asking to be paid. I paid them anyway. I paid everyone. It had never been about the money. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa was formally charged with extortion, fraud, and uttering threats. Dr. Tremblay's wife did, in fact, receive the file, and I understand that a civil suit is pending. 2 other women came forward after the news of the arrest made the Toronto Star. Women who had been engaged to men Vanessa had targeted in previous years. One of them, a woman from London, Ontario, called me personally to thank me. She had lost her fiancé, her home, and most of her savings to a manipulation that sounded almost identical to the one I had stopped. Daniel moved back into the house in Oakville for 2 months while he got himself sorted. He sold his condo in the distillery district. He started therapy, which he should have done after his mother died, and he did not argue with me when I suggested it. He took 6 weeks off work. We drove up to the cottage in Muskoka in April, when the ice was just starting to break on the lake, and we sat on the dock in parkas and drank coffee from thermoses. And we talked about Margaret. Really talked. For the first time since she died. "I think I knew, Dad," he said one afternoon, watching a loon dive into the open water near the point. "I think I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to be alone anymore." "I know, son." "How did you know?" "With Mom. That she was the right one." I thought about it for a long time before I answered. She was the first woman who ever asked me a question and actually wanted to hear my answer. That's how I knew. Linda Boucher and I stayed in touch. It was not a romance, let me be clear. I was not ready for that, and I don't know if I ever will be. Margaret was my great love, and there's only one of those in a life. But Linda and I met for coffee every few weeks, first at the diner in Scarborough, then at my favorite bakery in Oakville, and eventually we began talking on the phone in the evenings, the way friends do. She had spent her whole life cleaning up her daughter's messes and believing, somewhere deep inside, that she deserved the misery of it. She was beginning, slowly, to believe otherwise. She came for dinner on a Sunday in June. Daniel was there. He had started dating someone new, a school teacher from Guelph named Rachel, who had been his best friend in university, and who had, it turned out, been quietly in love with him for most of a decade. She was exactly what Margaret would have wanted for him. Patient, kind, and utterly uninterested in the cottage, or the company, or anything except him. Linda brought a pie. She had baked it herself, from Margaret's recipe, which I had given her the previous week. It was a sour cherry pie, and it was almost exactly right. We sat in the kitchen, the 4 of us, and we ate the pie, and Daniel told a story about something his mother had said to him once when he was 7, and we all laughed, and for the first time since the cancer, the house felt like a home again. That night, after everyone had gone, I stood in the backyard where Margaret had planted her perennials, and I looked up at the stars over Oakville, which are never quite as bright as they are at the cottage, but are bright enough. I thought about my wife. I thought about what she would have said if she had been there at Langdon Hall when I stood up and played the recording. I think she would have said, "Ray, you took long enough." And I think she would have smiled. My son got married the following summer at the cottage in Muskoka to Rachel. It was a small wedding, 30 people. A minister from the town of Bracebridge came out and did the ceremony on the dock. Daniel cried again, but this time I knew exactly why. Linda was there. So was her grandson, the little boy from Sherbrooke, who was not so little anymore. She had reconnected with him, with my help. His father had been gracious. The boy was 14 and quiet, and a good kid, and he called me sir the whole weekend, which I found charming. I walked my son down a short dock to meet his bride. I put his hand in hers. I stepped back. Behind us, the lake was still. The loons were calling. I looked up at the sky, the Ontario sky I have known my whole life, and I said, quietly, to a wife who was not there but was, "Margaret, it's okay. We did okay." And we had